Hey everybody, welcome to another CrushLivePoker.com hand review. And as always, we're going to take a look here at a hand that I recently played over at the Texas Card House live stream, TCH Live, which of course goes on Mondays and Thursdays from 6 to 10 p.m. Central Time. Mondays is their big game, which is the game here. It's a 5-5 Texas Match the Stack game. And we've been getting a lot of good footage from TCH Live as I basically play pretty much every Monday that I possibly can play. You can check out over on TCH Live's YouTube channel some highlight clips, and that's where you want to watch the live stream show. This is a very, very unique hand here because it's probably the only time in the history of my poker career, I've been playing poker for like 15 years, where I have actually played a 6-bet pot and gone post-flop. So I'm here in the strat. We're playing 5-5, and I put the $10 straddle on, and we're playing this hand 5.6K effective, and the effective stack here is Alex in seat 1. He's a little bit shorter than I am. Of course, the blacks are hundreds, the greens are quarters. The reds are $5 chips, and those beige chips are actually tip chips that do not play. And I had actually been relatively card dead the entire night. This actually came from about 3 hours into the episode that was live streamed on March 9th, March 9th, so from last week. And I had just won a big pot with nut flush over second nut flush. We get into this hand here, but I really had any premiums pre-flops. We get in this hand here where I see the hijack open here to 35, which was somewhat standard. And then Dudley here, 3-bets on the button to 125. And I casually look down at my hand, and I have not looked down at my hand yet until right now. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Betting a 3-bet. Oh, I've got pocket aces for the first time all night. So 35 to 125. And obviously I have a standard 4-bet here, as I don't want to just call and be out of position against two players. And this is really where we're going to take us in terms of a multi-bet scenario. Aces is really supposed to be always putting in the extra bet. Now, in live poker, we can certainly get into situations where you might not want to have a 5 betting range because it's so extreme, or in this case, what we're going to see, which is basically a 6 betting range. Also, the pot gets so large, you might not necessarily need to put in the extra bet. But let's see how this one plays out here. I mean, obviously, it's a pretty standard 4-bet here. For me, it's a cold 4-bet too, meaning I'm not the initial opener. We've got an open and a 3-bet, and I'm going to be basically 4-betting without any action. I haven't done anything. Normally, you can go from 2.5 to sometimes even 4x, even as a 4-bet, depending on the situations. One of the things that I think people think that it's automatically just going to be a small 4-bet as a cold 4-bet. But as the stacks do get deeper, you are incentivized to 4-bet a little bit on the larger side from out of position. The weird thing about this is that if you're unbelievably deep, you're actually not supposed to do a ton of large betting from out of position with any holding. Here, we are, about 550 big blinds deep with $10 here, basically on the blind. I mean, we're playing 5-5-10, and we start the hand at about 5,600. So, 560 big blinds deep, basically. So I just choose to kind of keep almost like a simple strategy, and I go 3x here. So 35 to 125 to 375. If it's like a straight 3-bet, usually it's going to be 4x plus the calls. But I just go straight 4-bet to 375. Now, Alex here in the hijack, again, we are playing very, very deep here. This is not a situation where it's, simply a raise and a call from the button, and then I'm 3-betting out of the blind, where he's incentivized to 4-bet to get himself position and get the guy out. He's open and someone's 3-bet, and I 4-bet here. So things start to go, these are very, very extreme things. There's still probably something to be said about getting it heads up and not dealing with the button here. And Dudley's got about 4.5K, but whatever the scenario, he's always going to want to play this more heads up than multi-way here in a spot like this. I think at this stack depth, though, I would probably choose to call quite a bit with my ace king. Now, the funny thing about here is that when we're talking about multi-bet scenarios, if you're really, really looking at the extreme and you always are going to go with the plan of putting the extra bet in with ace ace, no matter what the scenario, it's actually supposed to be balanced out with some, I guess you could say, bluffs, and those bluffs would be ace king suited. So you look at that and it's like 6 combos of aces, 4 combos of ace king suited. You will actually see in a solver that kings will be played here way more as a call than ace king suited. Ace king suited is actually taken for the extra bet if you're going to play that strategy. So I don't really mind what his response was here in this particular situation. I think that he is going to go for a 5-bet. So we're already sort of, in kind of uncharted water here. But he does have a player behind. Like if Dudley wasn't in there and this was just a straight open and a 3-bet, or somehow it was a cold 4-bet, but the other guy was going to fold his hand, or he folded out a turn and you thought it was going to be heads up, no matter what, you could play this hand obviously as a call. But here he is going to go for the 5-bet, which in itself is very, very rare. Now, people will sometimes go, like I said, 2.5 to 3x usually as a cold 4-bet size. We don't really talk about what a 5-bet size should be here. He goes from 375 to basically 1.1, which I think really is kind of on the large side. I mean, it's basically 3x. He is sort of in position, but 3x as a 5-bet size. And he makes it 1100, and obviously pocket nines gets out of the way very, very quickly. Now, this is where at the time, by the way, the pink chips are 500 too. At the time, I was obviously thinking, well, what am I going to do here? And I'm doing some math out. I was like, I think a lot of people are going to just call here in a spot like this, because really, what are you bluffing with, with a 6-bet range? And I did some math, and I'm like, well, if I call the 725, the pot's going to be about 2,300, 2,400. We're going to have 2 pot-sized bets left. But at the same time, I also thought if I called, there was going to be a lot of pot control from Alex in position quite a bit. Like the act of me calling a 5-bet is really, really strong in itself. I mean, not only have I cold 4-bet, but I'm actually going to be calling a 5-bet. And the 5-bet was not small. It's not like a 5-bet that was, basically a min raise where I'm forced to continue with a lot of hands in my range. And this is a large 5-bet to almost, like I said, 3x. So, I'm weighing the options and I'm like, I don't even know how much this does for me if I just call. So then I start to go and like, wow, am I actually going to 6-bet here? Am I going to re-raise the 5-bet? And now really what you have to go through, and you can look at this a number of different ways, is there enough money where I can basically raise where there still appears to be some fold equity from my opponent? And there's 2 ways you can look at that. You can look at that and you're like, well, the way that I kind of look at it is if my opponent shoves over the top of my raise, will I be getting 2-1 or less? Like I never want to put in the extra bet, and then when my opponent, if he were to shove all in, I would be getting more than 2-1, because that would mean that I would always be calling off. A more simple way to look at that is that you don't really want to raise more than 1/3 of effective stacks, because if you start to raise more than 1/3 of effective stacks, then again, you're always going to be getting more than 2-1 on a shove from your opponent, and you're really not going to fold. So if there's a situation where you can raise, 1/3 of effective stacks or less, then it's a valid raise. It's a legitimate raise because there is fold equity from your opponent. And in theory, if you can't do that because of the effective stack sizes, then you're supposed to just shove, because you're not going to really fold anyways. Now, with that being said, though, I think as a live exploit, and I've done this many, many times before, specifically with aces, you certainly can make raises where you're still never going to fold, and you'll still get the action by raising over the more than 1/3 of a stack, even though, the guy shoving has no fold equity, but you'll get the action as a call, whereas if you shoved, he would just fold. Now, if you watch my last video, and I was talking about how I struggle sometimes in live situations with basically chip recognition and also identifying stacks of chips and how much they are worth, and how, just visualizing that. I'm looking over at his stack, and at the time, I can see here, as our mouse points out here, that not even looking at what it says 4.5K. He's got 2,000 here. He's got 3 stacks of green, that's 1,500. 2 stacks of black, that's basically 3,700, 38, 39, 40. He basically has 4,500, which is what really is going to be said. So can I raise to an amount here that's less than 1/3 of effective stacks? Well, if he started with 56, basically, which he did, then 1/3 of effective stacks would be right around maybe right around 1,850 to 1,900, something like that. So that cusp here of 1/3 of effective stacks should be right around 1,800. Now he made it 1,100 on top of my 375. So that's he's basically raising me 725 more. So if I were to click this back to 1825, I think we're right there where there still appears to be some fold equity. Of course, like I will often do, and I will fully admit it is kind of a weakness in my live game, I miscalculated very, very slightly based upon what's actually in front now, looking back here at the video, and I made it just a hair too large. I ended up making it 1950, but my intention was to get it so that there was still fold equity here from my opponent. And there's the 6-bet. So I go to 1950. So again, it's, raised at 35, 125. I go 375 as a cold 4-bet. He goes to 1,100. The graphics say 2K. I know it was 1950. I was there. Probably should be 100 less. It should be 1825 to 1850. But what's interesting here, though, is that he's still getting an incredible price. And when we look at hand reading in this particular snare, which I think is going to be very, very important post-flop, he is getting basically 4-1 here on a call. So it's like, what hands can he fold here? He certainly can't fold ace-king suited. Could he fold like even ace-5 suited or ace-4 suited, getting like 4-1? Maybe you make a case for like if he was cold 4-betting, cold 5-betting like ace-queen off, or some sort of bullshit blocker play with like king-queen off or ace-jack off or something like that. Now he can fold, but like I said, he's getting such an unbelievable price, and this is really going to fit into the hand reading later on, as we go post-flop. But he's going to be, he's going to think about it for a while, and he's eventually going to make the call about 20 seconds later. So he calls, and I knew right away. I'm like, all right, we're going to have a pot size bet left here. And I think that this is where people sometimes get scared when the pots get really, really large, and they're like, well, I don't want to see a king. I don't want to see a king. Well, why wouldn't we want to see a king? Because, we automatically think, well, he's going to have pocket kings here. Like, he's just going to have pocket kings here. This is the only hand that he's calling with, when in fact, the very important part of this hand with hand reading, we have to go back and see the flop price the pre-flop price that he's getting. And we know that he's going to be calling with more hands than just pocket kings here, getting 4-1. So we're going to go to the flop here with about 4K, and he's got about 3,600 left, just under a pot size bet left. And of course, I see a king here. So king 8-7. So right off the bat, I'm like, all right, well, I could have just gotten, a bad beat here, but there's no way I can fold when I know that there are other hands in his range besides pocket kings. We only have one pot size bet left, right? So, sort of as a reflex, I was like, oh, am I supposed to check this board? But then when I realized that we have a pot size bet left, I was like, no. I mean, if he's got kings, he's got kings. I'm supposed to come out and bet that sort of standard, like, at this point, 20 to 25% of pot. And if I do come out and I bet 20%, which would be about 800, and he does have a hand like ace-5 of hearts, ace-4 of hearts, something like that, even a hand like 9-10 or jack-10 suited that he sort of come out of the box with and made a 5-bet to knock the other guy out, but then felt like he needed to call because of the pre-flop price he was getting, because it was a click back, he actually has to continue on. If I bet 8 or 900 here with a lot of those hands. So I was like, obviously I don't need to bet large here. I'm going to come out and I'm going to bet small. I'm not going to check. So I come out and I bet 900 here into a pot of 4K. So it's just slightly under, 1/4 the size of the pot. And he's going to think about it for a while, think. We're flipping through here for about 20 seconds, and he's going to eventually call. And I was like, there's obviously a possibility that he's going to have pocket kings here. By the way, if he does this with queens or jacks to get the guy out behind, he still has to call basically with pretty much any draw getting this price, any pair, a pair of nines plus. And if he's in there with those hands, but again, he was getting such an incredible pre-flop price with the 4-1 with the main click back. So turns the Queen of Hearts. I don't love that card because now I'm losing to pocket kings now and pocket queens, and somehow if he had like a king queen suited here, king queen of clubs, king queen of spades that took this line, I know it's rare, but I'm just going through the hands that I might lose to, and he's got about a half pot size bet left. This is a little interesting kind of intricate spot that I was thinking through at the time. I know I'm always going to get it in here no matter what. And, God bless him if he's got kings and queens and he shoves here, or I check and he checks it back, and then the river's a break and I shove and he checked back a set on the turn. God bless him. I know that I'm never folding, but what is the best way here to approach this spot? Obviously, it's probably not going to matter all that much, but what were the hands that I was talking about that might be light calls on the flop, given that click back pre-flop price that he got due to my, say, 1950 as a 6-bet? Ace-5 suited, those hands that are appealing, like the Jack-10 suited, things like that. All those hands, if I come out and bet and just jam, probably are just going to fold. But if I do check and I was playing some sort of bullshit, even though it's kind of an extreme, it gives those hands a chance to bluff. So I actually thought the more efficient way here for me to play this hand was probably just to check call all in. And yeah, it would suck if I checked and he checked it back and I bet the river. But again, I'm probably not missing the value because he's not going to call with those hands on the turn if I jam, whereas he might bluff with them. So I check. I'm really not liking the spot here if he jams, but there's really nothing I can do. Flipping forward about 20 seconds. He moves all in here, and you can see by the look on my face right here, I'm not pleased over here, and I'm just kind of trying to get a count. And, I always do this in big pots, and I'm like, I'm fucked. I'm screwed here. I look back at my cards, and I look back to make sure that I look back and I see that I don't have the ace of hearts. So that's actually a good thing. The fact that I don't have the ace of hearts is a good thing because it opens the possibility up of him having ace x of hearts, which might play it this way. It's really interesting for him because I feel like if I was in Alex's spot, I very well might check this back here on the turn. His hand doesn't really need a lot of protection. He's got the nut flush draw. Unless he thinks that he can bet me off the same hand. Like if I also had ace king and he's basically sort of betting me off of a free roll. It's an interesting spot because aces I think is a lot easier to call with than ace king. Because if you have ace king, maybe at best you're chopping, right? But his spot's interesting. I think a lot of people might check this back on the turn, and then maybe if the guy from up front jams a blank river, you could think about actually making an insane fold. But he's got the nut flush draw with ace king. I call, he goes, do you want to run it twice? I don't normally run it twice, but for whatever reason I said sure. Again, I've talked about this before. It makes no difference how many times you run it. It doesn't change anything. I will sometimes run it twice. I'll sometimes run it once. It depends on my mood. It depends on the other player. I've said this many, many times before. If I see a certain hand, listen, I'm not going to make the decision whether I'm going to run it once or twice based upon what I have or my opponent has, like if I'm ahead or if I'm a draw. But if I were to do that, it wouldn't matter. I can do it if I want to. It is such a ridiculous thing. It's so misunderstood. I could say, what do you have? And if you had ace king of hearts, I'd be like, no, I'm just going to run it once. Or put myself in a parallel situation and he had pocket queens, I can say, okay, I'll run it twice. There is no angle. I'm gaining no advantage by doing so. Like I said, insanely misunderstood. But we did end up running it twice, and I ended up winning both times. And I picked up a nice little session once again here on TCH Live. I had lost about 8,000 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then I came back with I think it was an $11,000 win 2 weeks ago, and then another $8,000 to $8,500 win. And this was a huge pot here at 5-5 match stack, over $10,000. Thanks for joining me. And again, if you want to check out TCH Live, head over to their YouTube channel Mondays and Thursdays at 6 p.m. Central Time.